Welcome, curious minds, to a pretty chilling deep dive today. We're exploring the darker side of adventure. We're not just looking for insights, really. We're digging into stories that might make you rethink that next long drive. We've gathered some really harrowing accounts, people who set out for fun or maybe escape, only to run into something truly unexpected and terrifying on the open road. These are tales of road trips gone wrong, the kind that stick with you.
It really is fascinating, isn't it? How road trips, they're often seen as a symbol of freedom, discovery, but they can quickly turn into something else entirely.
Yeah.
A landscape for fear.
Yeah.
What you see in these stories is that sudden stripping away of comfort, of control. It leaves people just vulnerable.
Absolutely, that contrast is stark. So, okay, let's unpack this. We've got quite a collection here. Stories that, might have you gripping your steering wheel a bit tighter next time. We're going to hear about a horrifying discovery out in the desert, a mysterious imposter on a lonely highway, a ranch that turned out to be, well, hellish, frankly. A hitchhiker situation gone very wrong, a truly nightmarish accident in a storm. And then two really unsettling cases, missing travelers, still wrapped in mystery. Okay, first up, we begin with a traveler and their friend. They were escaping the gray New England weather, driving south, and they ended up kind of charmed by New Mexico. It wasn't just the desert they expected, There were mountains, tall pines, quite beautiful, actually. So one night, they're tired, miles from where they planned to stop. They pull off onto this dirt road, winding through the trees, hoping to find a quiet spot, maybe a campground. They find a place, park, crack the windows for air. It stays pretty warm there, even at night. And they start to drift off, sounds of crickets, coyotes, but then something else. Hushed human voices.
Right.
And, really unnerving out there. Whispers. And as the narrator points out, whispers means someone doesn't want to be heard. Someone might be up to no good.
That's it, right there. That immediate shift from relaxation to high alert, triggered by something subtle, like hushed voices. Just shows how our sort of primal instincts kick in. They interpret danger, especially when you're out of your element, isolated like that.
Right. So the narrator, they actually had a .44 snub nose revolver. Picked it up for protection against wildlife, they said. But now, well, maybe useful for a different kind of threat. They wake their friend. Quick, tense discussion. They decide, okay, let's confront whoever's out there, maybe scare them off. They grab flashlights, shine them into the trees, call out, nothing. No reply. They wait a minute, then they make a decision. Maybe not the best one in hindsight. They decide to walk into the woods, investigate. And what they found, oh man, it was much, much worse than they could have imagined. Not robbers. First, the smell hits them, sickly sweet, like hot garbage. It gets stronger as they walk. Then they see it, a pit dug in the ground, shovels nearby, plastic sheets stained brownish red. Yeah, flies buzzing loudly around this open pit. And down at the bottom, a human body, beaten so badly it was barely recognizable, swollen, bruised. The narrator described it as a hideous imitation of the human form, face disfigured, eyelids shut, lips busted. Just awful.
It's unimaginable finding something like that.
They were terrified, obviously. Scrambled back to the car, just drove all night. Pure adrenaline. They reported it to a sheriff's department in the next town over. But they never heard anything back from the police, not a word. And that discovery, that image, it still haunts the narrator, wondering what that poor person could have possibly done to deserve all that. Okay, deep breath. From that darkness in New Mexico, let's shift gears. Let's talk about the dangers of human deception. This next story takes us to Wyoming. Why open spaces? Shows how quickly a routine stop can become really chilling. So, a group of friends, they're on this grunge-themed road trip to Seattle. Cruising the interstate, singing along to Alice in Chains, Suddenly, red and blue flashes in the rear view. But it's an unmarked vehicle, an old Dodge pickup truck. Pulls him over. The driver, civilian clothes, baseball cap, aviator sunglasses, checkered shirt. But he's got a utility belt and a badge. Demands licenses and registration. Very curt. The narrator mentioned how unsettling it was, this unmarked truck appearing out of nowhere on such a long, empty stretch of highway.
Yeah, that's an immediate red flag right there. An unmarked vehicle, especially in a rural area like that. It should make you cautious. And when an authority figure's actions seem off, like the aggressive tone, the lack of a standard marked car, our instincts often pick up on those inconsistencies. For good reason, usually.
Definitely. And this officer, he escalates things fast, asks what they're doing in Wyoming, then kind of mockingly dismisses their answer, asks about weapons, drugs, alcohol. They say no, sir, to everything, but he insists they all get out of the car. Then he demands the passengers' IDs, but they explain our IDs are in the car. And that's when he pulls out a revolver. She flicks off the safety, points it at them, says he needs to cover himself, then tells them go get the IDs.
Wow, that's not procedure. At all, pointing a weapon like that in that situation.
Not even close. The narrator is scared, obviously, but also just incredibly angry. already thinking about filing a formal complaint. So they get the IDs. The officer takes them back to his truck, makes some notes, talks on a cell phone, clearly not a police radio. Then he just walks back, tosses their IDs into the dirt by the road, spits, and says, "Gotta get out of Wyoming," then speeds off in a cloud of dust.
Bizarre and deeply menacing.
Totally. But it gets weirder. About an hour later, they get pulled over again. This time, it's a marked Wyoming Highway Patrol unit. Proper car, proper uniform. The narrator mentions the previous stop, thinking maybe it was related. But the real trooper, he's confused. He says, "I'm the only highway patrol in the county right now. If it wasn't me who pulled you over, I really don't know who did."
Chilling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They describe the first guy, the truck, the mustache, everything. The trooper has no idea who they're talking about. And it hits them. That first guy, he wasn't highway patrol. Wasn't even a volunteer deputy. He was an imposter.
Just someone with a badge and a gun, preying on travelers.
Exactly. They filed complaints with the state police, but nothing ever came of it. The impersonator was never found. The lesson they learned, and it's a stark one: always ask for ID from officers, especially if something feels off. Inspect it carefully. There are, as they put it, real psychos out there. Okay, so from deceptive humans, let's talk about deceptive brochures. Imagine this. Years ago, way before the internet made everything visible, a family is planning a road trip to Big Bend National Park in Texas. They choose a ranch from a brochure, specifically want horseback riding, which they check on the phone. They pick one that's slightly cheaper, figure it's just, further out in the country. Neither brochure had any pictures, mind you, just descriptions.
The pre-internet travel gamble.
Yeah.
You really were just hoping for the best based on some text and maybe a drawing.
Totally. And the journey there, first sign of trouble. An 18-mile gravel road leads to a huge tire blowout, scorching Texas desert. Stranded, some local guy comes along, basically extorts them for a new tire. $150, which was a fortune back then. They had no choice, so they finally arrive, and it's just horror. The ranch, it's actually mobile homes perched precariously on tons of rocks piled up on hills. Just getting to their cabin is this dangerous climb over loose rocks. The narrator actually slips, falls, sprains an ankle. They couldn't believe a place like that even had a business license.
Wow, that really underscores the danger of incomplete information back then. Relying solely on a brochure, especially without pictures or reviews, it was a huge leap of faith. Sometimes it worked out, but clearly, sometimes it really, really didn't.
Oh, it got worse inside. The promised satellite TV only got one channel in some Asian language they didn't recognize. The shower, barely drizzled water, and it was scalding hot, impossible to actually wash. And then at night, these strange noises outside. Not coyotes, something else sniffing and scratching around the mobile home kept them awake all night. Just adding to the misery.
Right. So next morning, the husband goes for a walk, comes back looking grim. Remember the horseback riding? The reason they picked the place. Turns out the reason the horses weren't available wasn't because it was too early in the summer, like the owner claimed. It was because they were all lying dead in a field about a mile away, covered in flies.
Oh my God. That's beyond just a bad vacation. That's disturbing.
Yeah.
They left immediately, obviously. Went to the other ranch they'd considered, the slightly more expensive one, and it was perfect. Authentic rooms, old Texas-style beds, working TV with HBO, amazing showers, even ceiling fans. Everything the first place wasn't. The mistake of trying to save like $10 haunted them. A powerful reminder, maybe, that sometimes the cheapest option comes at a much higher cost. Never book without seeing pictures, even if it was harder back then. All right, next up. A story about picking up a hitchhiker. Something many people probably romanticize or used to. This involves a group of friends on a cross-country trip, Sacramento to Boise, Idaho. Full of youthful energy, feeling a bit like Jack Kerouac, Just a few miles outside Boise, they see a hitchhiker. Decide to pick him up. His name's Jimmy, apparently. Looks a bit rough. Leathery skin, the narrator said, like he'd spent way too much time in the sun. Jimmy seems friendly enough at first, shares some stories, but then the vibe changes drastically. One of the friends asks him kind of casually if he'd spent any time inside, meaning prison. Jimmy's whole demeanor shifts. He responds really contemptuously, "No, I don't ever intend to." The atmosphere in the van just gets super awkward after that.
Yeah, that's a switch.
Yeah.
A seemingly innocent question touches a nerve. Already a sign something's not quite right.
Exactly. Later, they're driving along, and an Idaho State police cruiser appears behind them. Jimmy immediately ducks down in his seat, hides. Then the lights and sirens come on. The narrator realizes, okay, something's definitely up, and then it gets really bad really fast. One of the friends in the back suddenly cries out, "What, do you have a gun, huh?" And then yells to the driver, "You keep this thing moving, don't start for nothing." The narrator hears the distinct click of a weapons hammer being cocked, followed by Jimmy's voice, cold and chilling. "You slow this man down and I'ma shoot every single one of you, you hear?"
Wow. Just wow. From picking up a hitchhiker to a full-blown hostage situation in minutes, it perfectly illustrates that unpredictability. An act of kindness, or maybe just a youthful adventure, suddenly becomes life-threatening. It underlines just how fast danger can escalate on the road.
Totally trapped. Cop car behind them, armed man inside. The narrator, just out of habit, glances at the fuel gauge, sees they've only got a few miles of gas left, empty. A desperate idea forms. He has to pretend to be on Jimmy's side. So he starts this performance, tells Jimmy, "Hey man, we're running out of gas, we have to pull over." He advises Jimmy, "When we stop, you gotta jump out and run. Don't look back, just go."
Quick thinking under immense pressure.
Incredibly. He said it was an Oscar-winning performance, and Jimmy buys it, pats the narrator on the shoulder like, "Okay, good plan." The van finally rolls to a stop out of gas, and Jimmy, he bolts, just hauls it into the trees, as the narrator put it. The police immediately secure the friends, guns drawn. A canine unit goes after Jimmy into the woods. The cops searched the van for like an hour. Thankfully, they'd finished all their beer the night before, so nothing illegal was found. Eventually, the police confirmed, yeah, you guys were clearly hostages. They let them go. Jimmy, never caught. They suspect his name wasn't even Jimmy. And the narrator says they have zero intention of ever picking up a hitchhiker again. Can't blame them. Okay, let's travel across the globe now. Our next account comes from India. The narrator calls it the most terrible night of my entire life. It was their first ever road trip. 7 friends, Delhi to Kolkata in a rental car. They even had to bribe staff just to get the booking sorted out. It's late, near midnight. They're on a big highway. Music's playing, people are smoking, drinking beers they bought to save time stopping. Then, around 1:30 a.m., this heavy thunderstorm hits. Pouring rain, terrible visibility, but the driver, who apparently wasn't the most trusted one and had been drinking, refuses to slow down. He's doing like 80 kilometers per hour, saying he's enjoying the speed.
Well, that's just a recipe for disaster. Driving like that in those conditions, especially after drinking.
The narrator feels incredibly uneasy, describes feeling numb, like I was waiting for the accident to happen, but they don't say anything. Wants to look cool and calm, just chain-smoking cigarettes to try and manage the anxiety.
And that's such a powerful, painful point in the story, that regret, not speaking up, not voicing those insecurities, as they put it. It really highlights how group dynamics, maybe wanting to fit in or not seem scared, can tragically override our basic self-preservation instincts. A tough lesson.
A very tough lesson, because closer to 2:30 a.m. on a dark bridge, the inevitable happens. The car drifts left. The driver loses control completely, smashes right through the metal fence on the side of the bridge, and the car just falls, plunges down into a deep pond below. The narrator blacks out for a moment. They come to, underwater, manage to get out of the wrecked car, drenched. 3 of the friends are injured, including the narrator, bleeding from their ears, fingers cut up, ended up needing 7 stitches in 1 ear. Miraculously, someone's iPhone 7 was still working after being submerged. That became their lifeline, allowed them to call emergency services. They get rescued, taken to a hospital, released around 5 a.m. Just profoundly thankful to be alive, but traumatized. The narrator says for months afterwards, they were afraid of cars, afraid of rain. The trauma lingered. Years later, after healing, learning to drive safely themselves, they actually went back to the accident spot, tried to exhale the trauma, as they put it. But here's a really chilling, almost unbelievable detail. On a different trip, much later, they were assigned a rental van, a red one. It turned out to be the exact same van, same license plate, that had been wrecked and covered in blood that night. It had apparently been repaired and put back into service.
No way. That's almost supernatural, or just incredibly negligent by the rental company.
Right. Only one other friend from the original trip noticed. They just looked at each other. Resulted in, quote, silence with a smile. Sends shivers down your spine, doesn't it? Okay, now we shift from personal accounts to 2 true crime mysteries, unsolved in many ways, cases involving road trips that ended in disappearance. First, the case of Lyle and Marie McCann, an elderly couple from St. Albert, Alberta, Canada. This was back in July 2010. They left home on a road trip. They were heading to British Columbia to pick up their daughter, Trudy, at the airport in Abbotsford. They were last seen definitively at a Superstore gas station near their home, filling up their motorhome, a 1999 Gulfstream. It was towing their green Hyundai Tucson SUV. Just 2 days later, that motorhome was found at a campsite, Minnow Lake Campground near Edson, Alberta, but was burned out, completely destroyed by fire. No bodies were found inside, and their Hyundai Tucson was missing.
And right away, that's deeply concerning. A burned vehicle, missing occupants, missing towed car. It immediately points away from a simple accident or breakdown.
Exactly. Trudy couldn't reach them by phone. They didn't arrive in BC as planned. She contacted the RCMP, the Mounties. The burned motorhome was quickly linked to the McCanns. Their Hyundai was found 11 days later, hidden in the woods further east. Foul play was suspected right from the start. A person of interest quickly emerged. Travis Edward Vader, he was 38 at the time, had a pretty significant criminal history, drugs, theft, weapons charges. He was actually arrested shortly after on unrelated outstanding warrants.
And this case becomes a stark example of the immense difficulty in prosecuting a crime, especially murder, when the victims' bodies are never found. That lack of central physical evidence complicates everything: the investigation, the charges, the trial itself.
Definitely. Vader's own sister told police he'd stayed with her around the time the McCanns vanished, looking tired, sick. Police searched Vader's last known residence exhaustively, even brought in a dive team, searched a septic tank, found nothing related to the McCanns. A year after they disappeared, with no sign of them, Lyle and Marie McCann were legally declared deceased. Vader was eventually charged with first-degree murder. But the legal path was really complex. He was actually convicted on some unrelated drug and weapons charges first, which some saw as a way to keep him in custody while the murder case was built. He fought those charges, was even found not guilty on appeal for some, got released briefly, telling the media that RCMP had destroyed my life. But then, just 2 months later, he was arrested again, formally charged with the McCann's murders.
It was a very convoluted legal process, reflecting the challenges of building a case without the bodies.
Extremely. In 2016, a judge found Vader guilty initially of second-degree murder. But that verdict itself caused controversy because it relied on a section of the criminal code that had been declared unconstitutional years earlier. So the conviction was ultimately downgraded to manslaughter. Vader received a life sentence, but with parole eligibility after 7 years. The question still lingers for many, though. Was Travis Vader truly responsible for the McCanns' deaths? Or was he perhaps a convenient scapegoat given his history, especially since their bodies have never ever been found? That lack of closure is agonizing for the family. Our final story tonight is another deeply disturbing disappearance, this one from the Australian outback. It involves British travelers Peter Falconio and his girlfriend Joanne Lees. July 2001. They were driving their orange VW camper van along the remote Stewart Highway late at night in the Northern Territory. Suddenly, a white Toyota 4WD starts following them closely. The driver of the Toyota pulls up alongside, making frantic gestures, waving them down. Claims he saw sparks coming from their van's exhaust pipe. Peter, concerned, pulls over. He gets out and walks towards the back of the van with the other man to check it out. Joanne stays in the driver's seat, feeling suspicious about the situation.
And that's the chilling setup, isn't it? The ruse. Those sparks from the exhaust. A calculated deception specifically designed to get them to stop in that incredibly isolated location. It's pure premeditation.
Yeah. A moment later, Joanne hears a loud bang, like a gunshot, from the rear of the van. Then, the stranger appears at her driver's side window. He's holding a large silver revolver. He forces the window down, climbs in. He ties her hands behind her back with black cable ties. It's clear this was planned. He had the gun, the ties ready. He tries to bind her feet too, tries to gag her with tape, but Joanne fights back. Kicks him, screams. She later said she knew if he got her into his vehicle, she'd be dead. He manages to drag her out of the van toward his Toyota 4WD. His dog is in the backseat, barking savagely. But then, in a moment that probably saved her life, sheer terror, adrenaline, the man turns away briefly. Apparently to move Peter's body, which Joanne glimpsed wrapped in something on the ground. In that instant, Joanne runs. She just bolts into the dark bushland off the side of the highway.
Incredible presence of mind and absolute terror.
Absolutely. She hides in the low bushes. The man comes looking for her, passes by her hiding spot 3 times with a flashlight and his dog. She stays hidden, terrified. Finally, hours later, around 12:35 a.m., she feels it's safe enough to emerge. She flags down a passing road train, a huge truck. The drivers take her to safety in a small town called Tight Tree, and the police are called. A massive search begins for Peter and the gunman. At the scene, police find that telltale pool of blood on the highway shoulder, partially covered with dirt. They find the couple's camper van hidden about 80 meters off the road in the scrub, but Peter Falconio's body never found, to this day.
Just like the McCann case, that absence of the body created intense media speculation and, of course, immense pain for the family. Joanne Lees faced intense scrutiny herself initially.
She did. The investigation, though, focused heavily on DNA. They found unidentified male DNA on Joanne's t-shirt, on the cable ties used to bind her, and crucially on the camper van's gear stick. They also had CCTV footage from a truck stop hours earlier, showing a man matching the description Joanne gave. Eventually, this led them to Bradley John Murdoch. Murdoch had a history of violence, drug running. He actually went missing for about a year after the attack before being arrested in another state on unrelated charges. At his trial in 2005, Joanne Lees identified Murdoch. She was unwavering. Expert testimony linked the DNA found at the scene on her shirt, the ties, the gear stick, overwhelmingly to Murdoch. The odds were put at something like 50 quadrillion to 1 against it being anyone else.
Yeah, that DNA evidence became absolutely crucial in securing the conviction without the body.
It was. The jury returned a unanimous guilty verdict. Murdoch was sentenced to life in prison for Peter Falconio's murder and for the assault and attempted kidnapping of Joanne Lees, minimum 28 years. But despite that conviction, Bradley Murdoch has never revealed where Peter Falconio's body is. That final piece of the puzzle, that closure for Peter's family, remains missing. Another haunting mystery tied to the open road.
Wow. These stories.
Yeah.
They really do underscore how quickly a journey, something meant to be carefree, can just turn into an absolute living nightmare, can't they? From those desolate roads in New Mexico, the highways of Wyoming, to the vast Australian outback. The vulnerability you face out there is just, it's a stark reminder. Sometimes the scariest stories, they're not fiction at all.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About vigilance, about being prepared. Maybe having a healthy dose of skepticism, even when you're doing something as seemingly simple as a road trip. These accounts are powerful cautionary tales. They really urge us all to be mindful, be aware of our surroundings, and absolutely trust our gut instincts. If something feels wrong, it very well might be. Absolutely. Yeah, these tales definitely stick with you. They remind us that adventure, even just driving somewhere new, can quickly veer into something truly horrifying. What stands out to you from these deep dives, and maybe what will you be more mindful of on your next journey?
Well, thank you for joining us on this.
Yeah, pretty chilling deep dive. If you found these stories as captivating and maybe as terrifying as we did, please do make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and definitely hit that subscribe button for more in-depth explorations right here from Horror Docx. Your support really helps us bring you more stories that make you think, make you question, and maybe make you keep an extra eye on that rearview mirror. Until next time, please stay safe out there.